What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a special episode for you guys. We're going to be checking out my friend Matt in Southern California's Reef tank. He's got a mixed reef with mostly SPS. So thank you Matt for letting me into your house and record your tank. If you guys happen to live in the Southern California area and you got a pretty sweet tank, go ahead and shoot me a message on Instagram and I'd be happy to shoot your tank and make a video like this to help inspire other reefers out there. If you like it, please like and subscribe and we'll see you next time. So let's go check this tank out. Well, thanks Matt for having me over at your house and checking out your freaking awesome tank, man.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
For coming out.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, just quickly introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about your tank, how long it's been running, and how many total volume you have here.
Matt McHugh, Les Paul player on many forums and Instagram. I've been reefing for close to 15 years. This specific tank behind us has been up. It's a 180. It's been up for 6 years. Crashed after 2 years. Still don't know the reason why. Okay. And put it back online 4 years ago. Awesome. And this is the growth we're getting. Cool.
And you have a frag tank that's plumbed in here on the left-hand side?
Correct. So we have a 20-gallon frag tank off to the side with a 100-gallon capacity sump, but it runs at 40 gallons. I think we're at roughly 220 gallons.
Sick. And I know the question everyone's going to have in the comments, if any, is, hey, what kind of equipment are you running? Because obviously you're doing some great work behind you here.
I run KISS method, keep it simple.
Okay.
And no filter socks, heavy skim, Chaeto, a small amount of bio pellets, GFO as needed, and test. I shouldn't say no water change, minimal water changes. Only if I pull frags out or whatever, sometimes I have to put a little water in, but I do not do consistent water changes on this system here.
Okay, awesome. I heard you speak a little bit to the nutrient control there. I do believe you're running a skimmer. What kind of skimmer are you running?
This is an ATV 1050.
Okay. So
it's pretty big. I think the capacity is 500 gallons.
Okay.
Published with ATV, which is
perfect. And what kind of lights are you running on the tank?
Currently on this tank, up here is an 8-bulb ATI that includes 6 Blue Plus, Purple Plus, and an Antinic, 2 Reef Brights, and a DIY solderless setup that I run that is controlled through the Apex Dawn Dusk. Frag tank has a G5 Blue, and then the sump has a G2 with the Reef Bright add-on.
Cool. And what kind of lighting schedule are you running on that? How many hours a day?
Everything runs 13 hours.
13 hours
I start at 11 and everything turns off at midnight. Awesome. The peak is probably about 5 to 6 hours.
Have you ever tested PAR and kind of know what top, middle, bottom kind of is around?
I have a PAR meter and I never map it out. I'm not a good following instruction guy. I just kind of put it right where I think I'm gonna need to know, and if it's good, I put it away.
Cool.
So I think about 250 at about 2/3 up in the tank.
Awesome. And when you started the tank, because I've heard a lot of people talk about issues with dynos and starting up tanks these days, live rock versus dry rock. When you started yours, did you start with live rock or dry rock?
I've been reefing for 15 years, like I said. So some of this rock has been with me all 15 years.
Okay.
So there used to be a 100-gallon here, and everything, it got switched in one day. Everything went into buckets, tank out, move this tank in, and then put everything back in. So it started seeded straight from another tank.
Cool. Have any of the corals or fish been with you that long, or?
The blue tang I bought it by the size of a quarter, maybe 6 or 8 years ago. And so I think that's the longest 10-year fish in here.
Cool. And since we're on the topic of fish, is there any particular fish which are your favorite?
Leopard wrasse, 6 of them in here.
6 of them?
6 or 7.
Awesome. Yeah, they are a beautiful species. How many fish do you think you have in total, if you happen to know around?
I think 30.
30?
Between frag tank, sump, and display.
Awesome. And between coral feeding, do you feed your corals at all, or are you more just heavy feeding your fish and letting them do the work?
Yeah, I don't, part of the discussion on nutrient export, I don't run filter socks. So I also don't feed my fish, I don't feed my coral. I feed my fish all the time, every day, multiple times, and let them do the coral feedings for me.
Awesome. What kind of food are you feeding the fish?
I try to do a lot of nori for the tangs almost daily.
Okay.
At least every other day between a new sheet and then what's left in the clip, I feed the alternate day. Mm-hmm. I do flake, pellets, and frozen soaked in silicone often.
Often. Cool. And are you saying you're feeding maybe twice a day or even more often than that?
There's an auto feeder on the display only, so they get fed a minimum of that time of day. Plus, I might walk by and put a pinch of flake. Yeah.
Where do you keep your water parameters, or ideally?
I run a calcium reactor.
Okay.
In a perfect world, I'd love it to just be between 8 and 8.5. Okay. But with corals this big, sometimes I struggle to keep up. 8.5 for alk, 8.5 for alk, and whatever the calcium is, I rarely test it.
Yeah. What about nutrient levels? Are you too concerned with nitrate and phosphate?
Well, I run a little bit of biopellets, so my nitrates are always on the low side. But again, when we talk about biopellets, I run maybe a quarter cup in a 4 or 5 inch diameter reactor. So I'm not running a lot at all. And my nitrates stay pretty low. Phosphate, I tested yesterday, I was at 0.17. So I actually turned a little bit of GFO on, just to kind of bring it down closer to 0.1. So if I could be, nitrates, if I could be at 10 to 20, I'd be happy. And if my phosphates are anywhere from 0.08 to 0.1, it's fine with me.
Awesome. I know another hot topic that a lot of people talk about these days is pH. Are you concerned with pH at all? Do you test very often for that, or is it just something you don't worry too much about?
Well, with the calcium reactor, I always run a little bit low.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love it to be over 8.2. Right now, it's probably, with the doors open, sitting at 8.
Okay.
And we just leave it. I don't do anything specific to keep it up.
Awesome. Besides the calcium reactor, is there anything specific like aminos or any other additives that you do to your tank for coral health, etc.?
I do trace a little bit as I can, but I'm horrible at a structured regimen for that.
Yeah.
I'm too lazy to put on a doser, just because I don't do any water changes, and I feel like it's a good idea to put something in there.
Perfect.
But
I know we talked about some of your favorite fish. Do you have any particular favorite corals in your tank?
I mean, obviously I'm an SPS dominant geek.
Yeah.
I prefer that. I'm drawn to those. But also right now, I've been on a torch kick and have purchased in trying to grow out some higher end torches.
Awesome.
Bounce mushrooms.
Do you have any kryptonite corals? Any corals that, for whatever reason, they just seem you can't keep in the tank?
Millies. Like, I struggle with millies. Right now I have ASD Rainbow and a couple no-namers, and they're doing okay. But historically speaking, I can't get them to grow.
Awesome.
I can't even keep them alive.
Yeah. Every reefer has some kind of tank or some kind of coral that, for whatever reason, and sometimes they're even the easy ones. Like, I've heard some people have digitatas be their kryptonite, or even Duncan, I've heard. So it's interesting to always ask that question to people. I know you've mentioned that you've had some kickbacks or some troubles with the tank in the past. Can you tell us about any pests or any major issues you've had with your tank throughout the years?
Well, I have tubular snails. You know, they string the webs. They're always a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I have black sponge. I have a little bit of Aptasia. I just dosed Reflux in the last 2 weeks for Bryopsis.
Yeah.
That was hanging out in the sump for many, many months. And I have bubble algae too. Like, that's something I have to manage, typically speaking, with hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah, I don't think anyone, no matter how hard you try, can really prevent certain pests, whether it be Aptasia or verminid snails. Those are two that kind of seem common to get in there no matter what you do, even if you do have quarantine tanks. Speaking of that, do you run any type of quarantine process with fish or coral?
I dip everything.
Okay.
Short of that, traditionally, I do not buy anything really from an LFS. I go to private parties, and that includes fish. Usually it's people breaking tanks down. I will buy their fish.
Awesome. I know you said that you are an SPS nut, but you do have a mixed reef. Do you find anything especially hard with trying to hold different types of corals in your tank?
I mean, obviously, if they don't like it, they die.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I've tried to keep encrusters off the rock. I put them on plates and let them grow down here. It allows me a little bit easier access for fragging. Also, they're not competing for rock space and ultimately stinging SPS. But
On such a big tank, do you run any type of controller or monitoring system?
on this setup, I absolutely run an Apex. I still have a Classic. I still just run the old school black one. I actually feel like the orange one seems to have more problems,
Okay.
more failures. I have 3 EV8s, one under the sump section, one for the display, and one for the frag section over there. And everything runs through it, except my return pumps. That's like the one thing that I don't. I run regular AC pumps, Askel block German-made pumps that just turn on and off.
Yeah.
I would just want them to run. I don't want any of the other controllers that are points of failure to be involved in my return pump.
Yeah. Redundancy is definitely key to success.
And I run one pump that just is a return pump, and then I run a utility pump as well that runs Chaeto reactor, biopellets, frag tank, chiller, all that separate.
You run Trident, or like how often are you testing?
I'm still old school. I still test with Salifert.
Okay.
I run Hana for phosphates only, and I have the old Hana phosphate. I don't think there was a low range even back when I bought it.
Okay.
And I try to test ALK once a week. That's what I try to do. But more often than not, I walk in here and I have one coral, Corbrand maleficent. It's the size of a dinner plate, and it tells me what's going on with the tank before I test.
Yeah.
So the biggest part is, if you want to do SPS and you want to be successful, you've got to be around your tank all the time. In my opinion, you've got to watch it, you got to know it, you got to feel it, you got to be part of it. And this is my indicator coral all the time.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I know a lot of people mention indicator corals. For anyone not super familiar with SPS, what are some abnormal signs that you look for in a coral that might indicate, hey, something's up with my tank?
Specific to maleficent nutrient problems, it starts to brown, starts to get darker, either high or low. And if the alk is off, your pulp extension would not be the same. So we would see far less pulp extension.
Awesome. I guess the last question really for you is, if I was a beginner trying to get into SBS especially, is there any specific tips that you might have for someone just getting out in the realm of SPS?
It's a loaded question. There's a lot of levels of things to prepare with. Number one, don't buy corals if you don't have equipment to support them. Don't buy SPS if you're not willing to make your water. Don't buy SPS if you don't have enough light. And in many cases, maybe you don't know. I also warn people, be cautious of information on Facebook. There's a lot of people giving information that only regurgitates stuff they've already heard. And the last thing is, think about what you're doing. Ask yourself, why am I doing it? If you're going to add carbon, why are you adding carbon? I don't run carbon in my tank unless there's a yellow hue or a smell. Or I'm fragging something inside the tank. A softie, I might do that. Why do you run biopellets? Why do you do a water change? All these are questions you have to ask. There has to be a reason to do things. And I think people forget, when you're new, you're super excited about whatever you think you're supposed to do. Whatever video you just watched says this is what they do, so you have to do that. But do you really? And try to find somebody that has success that you can lean on, that you can throw things at. That's one of the great things about this hobby, is I make great friends. And we debate and discuss and help each other all the time.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time, Matt. Your tank is freaking awesome. Before we leave, is there any last thoughts you'd like to add? And again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for coming. But for me, this is one of my passions. And so it's easy to come in here every day. There's very few days of the year that I'm not working on the tank, looking at the tank. That's what I think is part of my success.